I just wanted to start off by saying thank you to you guys for taking time out of your busy schedule to hear me speak about my journey and what positivity means to me. And I hope that through sharing my story, I'm able to help anybody who struggles from not only keeping a positive mindset, but a positive lifestyle. So the theme for this year's International Men's Day is positivity, and it got me thinking about what positivity means to everybody. So if you guys don't mind me asking, I'm just gonna pick a couple of you from the crowd. Like, don't be afraid to share your mind. What does positivity mean to you?
What's positive mean? I guess it's an outlook on life. It's taking things with a certain, putting like positive glasses on and seeing things in a certain way. So that's what it means.
Thank you so much. What does positivity mean to you?
Well, similar to what Anna has said, so maybe like, it's not, with notwithstanding like the situation that where you are in right now, like, you have the option to either see it like, half glass empty or half glass full. So it's more of like leaning towards the half glass full.
Full.
Yes.
Thank you so much, both of you. So, to me, actually, failure means positivity, and you guys might question as to how that works or what on earth does that mean? So, I just want to share with you guys my story. Alright, so my story starts 2.5 years ago, and I was this 16-year-old guy with no stress at all. The only things that mattered to me was watching the latest TV shows, watching the latest movies, going to every single music festival possible, and just hanging out with my friends. I didn't care at all about studying. Failing an exam wasn't like a big upset to me. I just really didn't care about school because my idea was that, I'm 16 years old, I'm probably gonna live until I'm 70 or 80, so let me enjoy my first bit of life, and maybe when I get to 20 onwards, I can start working. But I always thought that even if I don't work when I'm 16, I'm probably going to be that really successful guy who has a house in the Peak and is driving a Ferrari. So I was living in a bubble, and when I was on the brink of turning 17, that bubble popped and reality really hit me. So the summer before my senior year, I went to go visit my friend in India. It was the first time for me traveling myself. And I was really excited for this because I hadn't seen my best friend in ages, and I just wanted to have fun because I knew senior year would be stressful, even though I wasn't really going to take it seriously. I was just looking to get out of there, but I knew it would still be stressful. So being a guy, I never once thought about how doing something such as eating a bit of food could affect my body. These things didn't come across my head, and I never once thought through it and said, okay, I need to be safe with my options. I didn't really care because I always thought, I'm gonna live until I'm 70 or 80. So on the third day there, we decided to go for a run, and we went to the track. And after running half a lap, I couldn't even feel any air. I felt like my lungs had collapsed or something. I felt like there was nothing left to breathe. And you guys might be like, oh, it's not a surprise he can't run half a lap, he's quite chubby, but actually back then I was a lot fitter and I was playing a lot more sports. But now I just have an excuse not to go to the gym, hence why I've gained a bit of weight. But actually at that time I never thought through it. I just thought, oh, okay, you know what, maybe it's my asthma, I'm not gonna overthink it. And as my days there got longer, the symptoms started to get worse. I started to vomit, started to feel really sick, and I thought, you know what, everything's just gonna get better once I get back to Hong Kong. So I came back to Hong Kong, and 2 weeks later, it was the start of my senior year, something that I had been dreaming of for ages because I was just excited to get out of school. We walk into hall room, and my teacher looks over at me and she says, why do you look so sick? Why do you look so tired? And I was like, oh, I just went to India, it's just normal symptoms of going there. And we had an assembly an hour after, and 5 to 10 minutes after being in that room, I started to feel so sick, so I rushed myself to the nurse, and she was like, okay, if you feel sick, just go to the toilet. As soon as I step out of her office, I start to vomit everywhere, and she rushed me back inside her room. And she said, okay, you know what, you're really not fine, you need to go home, and you also need to go to the hospital to get yourself checked out. So I went home, I rested for a couple of hours. Then I went to the hospital, I did a couple of blood tests, some normal procedures, and the doctor said he would call me if anything was wrong. So I didn't overthink it. That night, I went to bed, and in the middle of the night, I woke up and I was like, I could not breathe again. And so I rushed myself to my parents' room, and my mom took me to the ER. And even though I was sitting in the ER, vomiting, not able to breathe, it took about 6 to 7 hours before I was attended by any doctors. The next morning, I was admitted into the children's ward at the hospital, and the only diagnosis they thought would be the diagnosis was hepatitis. And they said that the only solution for this was Panadols. So they were like, oh, let's keep him under supervision and see how he gets better. And so a couple of days passed, and my parents thought it was ridiculous that the only solution was Panadols. And they decided that, you know what? If he can just have Panadols, he might as well come home and rest, because we all know the environment of a hospital is quite negative and it's quite depressing, and there's nothing to do, there's no Wi-Fi, you just really had to sleep the whole time. So my parents took me home, and once I got home, things actually got worse. I started to cough out blood, I started to vomit a lot more, and my feet started to swell a lot. So after a week, my parents were like, okay, this is enough, you need to go back to the hospital again. We rushed back to the hospital, again another 6 or 7 hours of me waiting in the ER, and I was finally attended by a doctor. They put me to bed, and then the next morning I woke up with my mom next to my bed ready to give me breakfast, and she was on the way to work. And so she was leaving, and they came up to me and they were like, oh, you need to go downstairs for an echocardiogram. So I was like, okay, and my mom didn't overthink the situation. She said, you know what, he's nearly 17, let him go by himself. But the doctor insisted for her to come along with me. And we went down, I was wheeled down because I couldn't even walk. For me to walk from my room to the toilet, I would come back and I would have to sleep for another 5 hours because I had no energy at all. And so I was wheeled down to do my echocardiogram, and we're outside the ICU for some reason, and it all just seems a bit weird. And we're just wondering, okay, maybe this is the only place where they could do an echocardiogram for children. And I look inside and I see all these really sick children and small babies, and my mom looks at me and she was like, you know, KJ, this is where the really sick children are. You need to make sure you pray for them to recover, you know, so many of them are so helpless, and you just need to pray for their recovery. We get wheeled into the echocardiogram room. My mom and I are just sitting there, and we're just talking like it's normal. And the doctors are doing their job, and they start talking in Cantonese. And little did they know that my mom actually understood what they were saying. And they turned back and they looked at my mom and they said, do you know what's happening? And she was like, no. And they looked at her and they said, your son's heart is not even beating, it's just vibrating, and there's only an ejection fraction of 15%. So for you guys, just to educate you guys a little bit about what the ejection fraction is. The ejection fraction is something what doctors use to calculate they use it to calculate how good your heart is working, you know? And basically the idea is the ejection fraction calculates the amount, it compares the amount of blood in the chamber with the amount of blood that's coming out of the chamber. So for normal people, the ejection fraction is 50 to 70%, which means that you can go on with your daily life normally. And once you get to 41 to 49%, you would start to feel a little bit tired if you went for a walk, if you were walking your dog, you would start to feel a little bit tired. Anything below 40% is where you're in the heart failure stage. And my ejection fraction at the time was 15%. So that was extremely low. So I can truly say this is where my crazy hospital journey started as a 16-year-old. And right after receiving news like that, I could see my mom, like, she was crying so much. She didn't even know what was going on because we weren't educated about this stuff, and the doctors weren't really explaining the situation quite well. They just looked at my mom and they said, call the family. He has minutes, days, or hours left, you know? And I could see my mom crying, but something at the back of my head told me, you know what, everything's gonna be just fine. So I built up some courage and I looked at my mom and I said, don't worry, Mom, I'm gonna be just fine. So right after that, I was taken into the ICU room and I was actually put in an isolation ward in case there was any sort of bacteria or anything that could be given off to someone else. And 5 to 6 doctors rushed into the room, and they had actually told my mom that they were going to insert some needles in my leg. But what actually happened is that I was not informed about any of this, and there was a camera inside the ICU room. And I remember just going inside and thinking, okay, you know, everything's going to be fine. You know, 1 week, maybe I'll be out of here. It'll be great. And so they rushed into my room. I was on this really big ICU bed, and they tilt the bed backwards so my head's facing the ground. And they put something over my face. And all of a sudden, I started to feel needles going down my neck, and I was screaming. And after I went through all of this, my mom told me that she was actually watching the screen, and she started crying, and they turned off the monitor because they didn't know that she was actually watching what was going on. So I actually ended up spending about a week and a half there, and I spent my 17th birthday in the ICU. A funny story actually, is that my family has this tradition that when it's your birthday, we come into your room at 12 o'clock and they sing happy birthday to you. And my sister was at university at the time, but she was in town and she was just about to leave. And her one thing that she really wanted to do was come inside the room at 12 o'clock and wish me happy birthday with a cake. And so she asked my nurse, and my nurse told her that if you want your brother to have any more birthdays, you need to leave him alone this year. And so at 12 o'clock, no one came to wish me happy birthday. But one thing that's always stuck in my mind is what the nurse told me. So basically, he needed to clean up one of the wounds. So he came inside my room and he started using alcohol swabs. And he was like, you know what, you're 17. Usually you'd be in Langquai taking a tequila shot, but here I'm wiping your leg with an alcohol swab. And so every night I would actually kind of pray that I would wake up the next day. And I always knew I would, but I would just pray. And I would always just pray that I would wake up with a smile on my face, knowing that I'm going to beat this thing. So this is because the doctors kept on telling me the whole time, you have minutes, days, or hours left, and that's not even the slightest thing close to pleasant as what a 17-year-old would want to hear, you know? So after a couple of days, I was taken out of the isolation ward, and I was then transferred to Queen Mary Hospital, and they took over my case completely. So actually, after a couple of discussions with my doctors, they were still the same. They were like, the new Queen Mary doctors were saying that, you know what, you have hours, minutes, or days left. And I always kept on ignoring it. So after a couple of discussions with my doctors, my family, and everyone, we decided that the first step for solving my problem would be to do a biopsy. So for any of you, a biopsy, you may think, oh, it's just a simple procedure, you know? But for me, it was really risky, and it was a very big gamble because the chances of actually finding out what had happened to me was only 10%. So we were risking the whole operation just to get a 10% chance of actually finding out what my diagnosis was and whether it would be reversible. So we went ahead and we did the biopsy under no anesthesia at all because my doctors were never going to take the risk of slowing down my heart rate or putting me in a position like that. So we went ahead, we worked as a team in the operation theater. They kept on asking me how I felt about every single thing that they were doing. And we worked really hard as a team, and we came out and everything was great. And so a week and a half passed, and finally the results came back. And I remember sitting in my high dependency unit room, and my parents came, my doctors, and they were like, you know what? Sadly, we couldn't find out what the actual problem was, and we can already tell you that it's not reversible. So they diagnosed me with something called dilated cardiomyopathy, which stands for DCM. So dilated cardiomyopathy is a condition in which the heart's ability to pump blood is weakened because the main pumping chamber, the left ventricle, is enlarged and it's weakened. You see the left photo, the left ventricle down here is quite small, whereas when someone has dilated cardiomyopathy, it's nearly thrice the size. So we said, okay, what's the next step? You know, it's not reversible. What is the solution to this problem? And the only thing that my doctors were thinking of at the time was heart transplant. That's your only option, you know? And so they educated me about a heart transplant. You know, it takes a lot of care, and there's a lot of statistics that go along with it. They educated me about the statistics, and they were really negative about it. The only positive thing that they could say was, it's going to prolong your life. So I looked at them and I said, I don't care about what your statistics say, you know? I'm gonna beat this thing, and I don't care what any of your science has to prove, I'm gonna beat it. And just to show you guys some sort of statistics about heart transplantation, 85 to 90% of patients live 1 year post-operation, 75% of patients live 5 years post-operation, and 20% of patients live up to 20 years post-op. So we said, okay, what's the first step we can take? Because they told me, you know, Hong Kong has a lack of organ donors, but we need a solution, and we need a solution quickly. So we thought, you know what, why don't we take the next step as inserting a defibrillator? And the way the doctors discussed it with me was, a defibrillator is kind of like buying life insurance, and if you were to collapse or your heart were to stop beating, this machine is gonna send an impulse to your heart and it's gonna start beating again. So you know in the movies when the people have like a heart attack and they take out shock paddles and they put it on a person, basically this machine would actually just do this whilst it's inserted inside me. So we went ahead with that, and on October the 3rd, I was wheeled into the operation theater. Once again, no anesthesia, and I had to go through a 1 hour process. But the mistake I made this time was that the night before, I actually went on YouTube and I was trying to research about this whole thing. So I came past a video where it was like, oh, a defibrillator operation full video. So I put it, like I was watching it, and my nurses were looking at me like, you're crazy, man, like what are you doing? And when I was wheeled into the operation theater, I was like, oh, it's gonna be fine, no pain at all, you know? And I walk in, I was wheeled in, I get put on the table, and I felt like I knew everything that was gonna happen, you know? It was just like replaying in my head, and as soon as I heard that blade come on, I got so scared, because I didn't know that actually like the blade would hurt that much, and what they had to do is they actually had to cut open an air pocket in the left side of my chest, and I was completely awake the whole time, and then they had to insert the machine, put in some wires, wire it towards the heart, and it was an extremely painful situation that I was in, but I just knew that at the end of the day, after going through this pain, it was going to make me feel a lot better. So a couple of days post-op, everything was going great, and my doctors were like, okay, you can go home, you know, we're gonna let you go home. So everyone was celebrating. It had been 3 months since I'd been in the hospital. You know, I had not seen the outside of a hospital in so long, and everyone was just excited to have me home, take me out. My friends were coming over, my family was meeting me, everyone was just super happy. And the week outside of hospital went by really quickly, and I had gone out so many times, I was super exhausted. And a week and a half after, I actually had a checkup. And I was still really tired, I was fatigued, because even though this machine was inside me, it didn't mean that my heart was gonna get better, it was just sort of like a life insurance. So I went in a wheelchair and I went for my checkup, and the look on my doctor's face when they saw me was straight disappointment, because they could just see that my situation had gone so downhill in just a matter of a week and a half, and it made me feel really bad. So I was readmitted into the hospital, and days went on. They were trying to come up with different solutions. At this point, we're all working as a team, you know. After I told them that I didn't care about their statistics, I really gained some sort of respect from them because they saw that a 17-year-old has so much power that he wants to take the situation into his hands. And he's really telling us that, you know what, I want to live. So we worked as a team. They came up with like a game plan, and the solution was, again, heart transplantation. And after a couple of days, this amazing doctor walks inside my room, and she's the head of heart transplantation in Hong Kong. And she came and she spoke to me and she said, KJ, you know, I know you're 17 years old, you're really young, and I want to keep you here, you know, I know you're super positive, but there's just one situation I have to explain to you. And so she gave me a hypothetical situation in the sense that if there were 6 of me at the time sitting in a room, and we all went through the same process and treatment that I was going through at the time, after 6 months, only one of us would be alive. And she told me, I'm not willing to gamble that one person will be you. So, as we know, Hong Kong has a lack of organ donation. So there is one solution. And that one solution was something called an LVAD. So, what is an LVAD, some of you may ask? So an LVAD is a left ventricular assist device which is inserted into somebody through open heart surgery, and basically it is a fully functioning mechanical heart which is connected to the heart obviously, and there's wires leading out of the body which goes to one controller and then 2 batteries. So that may answer your question as to why I'm wearing a backpack today, and inside my backpack is my mechanical heart. So going through the LVAD operation, it was November 3rd, exactly 1 month after my defibrillator operation. And I was wheeled in the morning, and this time I didn't look at a video. I didn't want to see what was going to happen because I just didn't want to know. I just said, you know, I'm going to come out on the other end and I'm going to be just fine. So I was wheeled into the operation theater, and the operation took about 8 hours. I woke up nearly 24 hours after I was wheeled into the operation theater, and when I woke up, I had never felt so much pain in my life because there were tubes going down my neck everywhere, there were like wires everywhere, and I just didn't know what was going on. I woke up at maybe around 5 in the morning, and I just started crying because I was strapped down to the bed, I couldn't move, and I just felt helpless. And my nurse kind of just heard me crying, and she came over and she looked at me and she said, you know, KJ, you're so positive, just don't worry, everything's gonna be just fine. And she gave me a bit more medication. I fell back asleep. I woke up 4 hours after, and they were ready to take all the tubes out so I could finally breathe properly. We did exactly that. Kept sleeping and my parents came to visit me. And I was so excited because I was like, oh yes, food, I haven't eaten in like 2 days. And so when they finally brought food for me, the nurses looked at me and they were like, stop being lazy, just eat yourself. Why do you need someone to feed you, you know? So they forced me to feed myself food after going through open heart surgery. And I was so tired, I was about to fall asleep while the spoon was in my mouth. And I remember 3 days post-op, I still hadn't left my bed. My doctor, my surgeon actually, came around the bed and she was like, why are you so lazy? It's been 3 days since your open heart surgery. Like, don't cry about it. Get out of bed and do some walking, you know? That's the only way you're gonna recover. So I was like, really? It's been 3 days? That's all you're giving me? And so the nurses and I were working towards getting out of bed. And as soon as I pushed my body up, I felt a lot of pressure. And as soon as my feet hit the ground, I lost complete consciousness of my body, and the next thing I know, a couple of minutes later, I wake up on my bed with 5 to 10 nurses around me just slapping me on the face and KJ, wake up, wake up, wake up. And then the doctor was kind of like, oh, you know, just need to give him a bit more time. So they didn't force me to get out of bed for a little bit more, and a couple of days went on and I was finally let out of ICU and I went back to the normal unit. So this is where my recovery period started. But actually before that, I felt like I was at an absolute low in life, you know? I just kind of felt like this whole process was kind of worthless to me, and I kind of felt like I was not going to be able to do anything with my life anymore because I couldn't do so much compared to my friends. Like, swimming is not an option because the machine is not waterproof. Going abroad for university is not an option because I'm on the heart transplant list. And I just kept on thinking about the negatives and what I couldn't do, and I wasn't focusing on what I could do actually. So I remember one day my parents came to the hospital to visit me, and I was telling them, I feel so useless, like what can I even do with my life now? And they looked at me and they were like, why do you keep focusing on the negative? You've been positive the whole time, you're just gonna let something like this bring you down. And I was like, alright. So I changed my attitude and I started thinking positively. And one of my biggest inspirations at that point was someone who was actually sitting in the bed across me. He was another LVAD patient, and actually his story is a little bit different because he had been through a lot more than me, but he woke up every day with a smile on his face, and he was actually an amputee as well. So I realized that if he can wake up with a smile on his face every day, why can't I? So the recovery period started, and I just started to say, I'm gonna set myself a goal. I'm gonna be out of here by Christmas, and I'm gonna work towards that. And there were a bit of hiccups on the way. I kind of got a fever, and that's a really big problem when it comes with this machine because fever means that there's a virus, and therefore they have to monitor you a bit longer. And I didn't let that bring me down too much. I went every day for physiotherapy, and it got to the point where my physiotherapist would shout at me, and they told me that this is not the Olympics, just take it easy, Because I would go behind their back and I would increase the speed, and they just kept on getting really annoyed. But at the end of the day, come Christmas, I was eventually let out of hospital, and that was the best Christmas gift ever. So some of you may ask, what about school? So as I said, I was that 16-year-old kid who didn't care about school at all. But one decision which we had to make before when I was first diagnosed with heart failure, before going through all the operations, was that, I have heart failure, I'm gonna need some time to recover, we don't even know what's gonna happen in the next couple of months. So we decided that it would be best for me to take a year off school. Now, for me, this was not hard physically, it was very hard emotionally because ever since I moved to Hong Kong, my whole life has been with the people who were in my year group, All my memories, all the best days at school, everything was just with them. And I remember sitting in hospital and they were like, dude, when are you coming back to school? You're missing so much work, you're gonna fail your exams. And one of my best friends, he was actually joking with me and he was like, dude, you were gonna fail your exams anyways, but now it's just gonna be a lot worse, And so it was really hard for me to admit to them that I was taking a year off school and I was actually gonna go back a year. But once they actually all knew, they really did their best to include me in every graduation event possible. I remember that I was really upset that I wouldn't be walking on that stage that day to receive a diploma with them, but I was given the chance to be the keynote speaker at their graduation, and I did it with a massive smile on my face because I knew all my friends would be graduating. And that was really great, and I'm always going to be thankful for all those memories that I've had with those people. So, on August last year, after taking 1 year off school, I was going to my senior year once again, and nothing was going to stop me this time. The first month and a half I took quite easy. I was really just settling in, and I was trying to make friends because I didn't really know too many people in the year below. And I was just trying to get back on track with how much work the IB diploma is. It's like I wasn't going to take it seriously before, but something really changed about me and I became really mature, and I was like, you know what, I want to do well, so let me focus on my work as well. And at this point, I already knew it was final year as well. So before actually, my whole life plan was actually, I was meant to graduate and I was meant to go to the army because I'm a Singapore national. And then after that, I could think about university if I wanted to. But now that I had this problem, I knew that army was off the list and the next step was university. So only having the option to stay in Hong Kong, I felt a lot of pressure because I know that just to get into a normal university here, not even a top tier university, you need to have amazing grades because it's just competitive everywhere. So I knew that I had to really make it a mission of mine to bring up my grades. And this is what the IB system is. So that's the curriculum that I was studying at high school. So IB stands for International Baccalaureate. And in this program, students have to take 6 subjects, 3 standard level subjects and 3 higher level subjects, as well as a core subject called Theory of Knowledge, which is basically like world studies. So every subject, apart from Theory of Knowledge, has a highest grade being 7. And actually the total grade needed to pass the IB and to receive the diploma was 24. So at the time in year 12, I was on a 4 out of 7 for English, 2 out of 7 for math, 3 out of 7 for DT, 4 out of 7 for Spanish, 5 out of 7 for film, 5 out of 7 for business, and I was on 0 out of 3 points for Theory of Knowledge. So I was really like in failing condition, but I never once cared. I was like, oh, it's IB, man, like I can redo exams if I want to, you know? It's fine. But I remember one day I was in class and I was like, I was studying really hard. I was like, okay, let's make, I said, I want to make it my thing to really just pass this program. And I remember one day sitting in class and my teacher asked me to stay back behind and she was like, hey, I need to talk to you. And I was like, hi, what's up? And she was like, I can see that you're working really hard, but you're stressing yourself out too much and you're not like the other kids. You have a medical condition which you need to think about, and just passing will be great. Like there's so many things you can do with just passing the program. And for me, I didn't want to just settle for passing. That was not good enough for me. I said my mindset completely changed and I just wanted to do amazing because I knew that if I could pull myself out of a situation of not being here anymore and actually being able to attend school and just doing an amazing thing in the hospital, I knew I could apply the same mindset and positivity towards my education. So actually around about that time as well, I started to experience some social problems in the sense that the friends that I made were actually not looking out for my best interests. And at that point, I felt like as if the decisions that were made for my life were being made by them, and I was really not being myself. And I remember this one situation when I was at a party and my friend pulled me over and he said, you know what, there's something going on and basically if you don't do what we want you to do, you can say bye to us. We're not going to be your friends anymore, And I really could see that they're not looking out for my best interests, and I told myself, I'm not being true to myself and these guys are not being real friends to me. And as soon as I made the decision to do what was best for me, soon after that, school, it was like I was a ghost to them. So I didn't let this whole social situation bring me down. Instead, I put some positivity into it, and I told myself that I really have a good situation going on here because if they weren't my true friends, I don't need them in my life, and maybe it's just time for me to focus on myself. So I did exactly that, and I would work every single day in the library, and something that I use to express it is called grind time. And basically a lot of the students nowadays, they say, the word we use is called grind. So you work really, really hard towards achieving your goal. And I would sit there in the library every single day, and I would sit there after school as well. Didn't look at anyone in school, and the little bit of friends I had were really amazing. But it was really just time for me to focus on myself, and I knew that university applications were coming soon. So it was university application time, and I always knew that I wanted to study business because the field is so diverse. And these were my 4 options for university, but in reality, my only option was HKUST. And everyone kept on telling me, it's gonna be a bit of a reach for you. Basically, when applying to universities in high school, they give you 3 kind of ideas. So basically there's something called a reach, which would be your dream university and which you would get into if you performed really well in your exams. There's a safety, which is used for students who don't perform as well as they expected to in exams, and that's kind of like your backup option. And there's your firm, which is the university you are most likely to go to. So I remember I was talking to my counselors about where I wanted to apply to uni, and when they saw my list, they were like, what is going on here? You want your university to be HKUST. You're going to have to put so much effort in just to get there. And I was like, no, I'm going to do it. And I printed out photos of HKUST. I stuck it in my room. Every morning when I would wake up, I'd see like HKUST. Before I'd go to bed every night, I would watch HKUST videos. And it got to the point where everyone in my house was getting so pissed off because every night they would hear that same music going, and then they're like, no, they know it's the HKUST video. So one day, actually, my academic counselors and my teachers brought me in, as well as my parents, because they wanted to speak to us about being realistic with university options. And we sat in a room, and they told me, they were like, you know, KJ, like, you need to think about your medical situation. Like, you can't just be aiming, like, shooting for the stars here. You need to be realistic. And for me, realistic was HKUST, and I didn't let what they were gonna say bring me down, you know? I was like, okay, you can have your opinion on it. This is my choice. I know I'm aiming for HKUST. And like, everything was fine. Like, I know my teachers are just looking out for my best interest, but I just really wanted this dream to come true. So I kept on going on, and it came to about January to March, all right? And this is when Hong Kong universities will start to release their acceptance letters. And at this point, I'd only had an acceptance from one university, which is City University, and no other university had looked at me. But the way I looked at it was that, you know what, hearing nothing is better than being rejected, you know? So I tried to keep my positive mindset there. And my exams started at the end of April, and first week of May, I remember coming home from exams, and like, I got a message on my phone, and it was like, your HKUST status has been updated. And my mom was sitting across the table from me, so she decided that it would be funny to take out her phone and to record my reaction. And as soon as I logged into the website, bam, rejected. And I started crying, and I was shouting, and I was like, this is not fair. Like, I've dreamt so much about this, and you know, I put in my effort for nothing. You know, it's not paying off now. And I was really angry. But what she did was that she reminded me, she was like, you know, you can work your hardest and you can try and appeal the situation. So that's exactly what I did. And these were my IB results. And as you guys can see, everything was bumped up quite a lot. I went up 11 points in 1 year, which is a really big improvement considering the fact that in year 12, I didn't study at all. I took a year off. And then I came back and basically had to do 2 years worth of work in 1 year. And I was still able to bring up my grades to 34, despite having being in and out of hospital throughout the year as well. So after receiving my results, I was like, oh my god, I'm 1 point off the requirement for HKUST. So I knew before throwing in the towel, there was one last thing I could do, and that was to appeal my rejection from HKUST. So the Monday after results, we drove down to HKUST. We walked into the admissions office, and I told them, I need my spot here, you know? And he looked at me and he was like, I'm sorry to tell you, but no one actually looked at your application because you were so below the requirement, you know? And I was like, oh my god. So he was like, okay, there's a couple of things you can do. You can remark some exams, send them for remark, and you need to pray that at least one goes up. And you can also write an appeal application. So that's exactly what I did. And I was praying every night. I was like, dude, this is my only chance. And I finally landed an interview. I remember getting a call one day out of the blue, and he was like, hi, I'm calling from HKUST admissions office, and we would like to bring you in for an interview. And at that point, I was 3 days away from going on holiday to Singapore. And so what I tried to do actually is they told me, oh, can you please come in for an interview 2 days from now? And I was like, I am not prepared. Like, I've taken a month off, not thinking about anything, and I'm not prepared at all. So what I did is I tried to be a little bit cheeky at this point, and I told them, oh, I'm really sorry, I'm gonna be out of town. Is there any way I can push this interview a week back? And they were like, sorry, no, this is your only chance. You have to come in or you're giving up your spot. So I went in, and those 2 days I spent preparing every single moment, and everything I didn't know about HKUST I learned. And when I walked into that interview room, I was like, I felt so amazing because every single question I knew I had answered really well. And I came out, this is a photo of me actually right after my interview. And at this point, all the students had already started doing their induction courses, and there were only a couple of spots left actually. So it was a group of us who were actually fighting for this one spot at UST. And I remember coming out of the interview and I was so happy and I had the biggest smile on my face because I knew that I had done an amazing job and that if they didn't take me, it would have been their loss. So I remember coming to my parents, and I remember telling my sister as well. I was like, yeah, I got it, don't worry about it, you know? And they were like, dude, chill out, like they need time to like look over your interview, just analyze the whole situation. And 3 hours after going into the interview room, my phone buzzed again and it said your application status has been updated. And so I logged online and it was there, my acceptance letter was there. So I was so proud, and I think everyone around me was just super proud of me because they knew that I made this dream become reality. And so I spent a whole month celebrating, and it was the first induction course that I had gone to, and everyone there was talking about, you know, I'm on this sort of scholarship, I'm on that scholarship, what did you get in IB? And I proudly told them that I skimmed it and I just got it, and I had to appeal the whole situation, but I made it, you know? And so that night I just happened to be looking at my email, and again I got another email going like, your application status has been updated. And I was like, oh my god, did they take away my spot? Like, am I not going to uni anymore? Because at that point I had given up my spots at all other unis because I had already accepted HKUST. And I was so scared because I was like, what's going on? Why are they updating my application status? And I opened it and I couldn't believe what was in front of my eyes, but actually I received a full scholarship at HKUST. And I had completely forgotten that when I was applying, I had a really optimistic mindset, and I applied for a scholarship, I applied for the best programs there, and I wanted to show them that, you know, I'm not afraid to aim for the stars. And thankfully my scholarship came through, and I'm super proud to say that I'm on a full scholarship at HKUST. And so what I want to say is that I went from failing IB to being rejected to passing IB and doing really well at it actually, then having to appeal my situation, landing an interview, getting accepted, and then finally going on a full scholarship at my dream university. And that just comes to show that every one of us has that power to do whatever we want to do and to be able to turn every negative situation into a positive one, whether it be social, work, relationship. See, the funny thing is that when I went through this whole medical problem, and once I got my LVAD, I told my parents, I was like, oh my god, I'm never gonna have a girlfriend ever again, you know? And that was my biggest fear. I was like, no one's gonna look at me the same way, you know? I'm that like 17-year-old guy with a mechanical heart who even knows someone like that. And actually, what was my biggest insecurity actually turned out to be something really amazing, because I'm like super lucky to say that in 2 weeks' time I'm gonna be celebrating 1 year with my girlfriend, and that just comes to show that every negative situation we have can be turned into a positive. And instead of focusing on the negative, what we can do is we can carefully analyze the situation and take the perfect approach to turning whatever negative situation we have into a positive one. So my thing is, wake up every morning with an attitude of gratitude. And now, before I finish this talk, I just want to share with you guys a project that I've been working on for a while, ever since I got out of hospital. And basically, I started up a website, actually a blog, called Life at 15%, in which I shared my story, my experiences, everything of being in and out of hospital, what it's like to be a patient on the heart transplant list, and living with a mechanical heart, and just trying to be a normal teenager, you know? So I've shared every single one of my stories on this website. All my talks are on this website as well. So if you guys could give it a look as well and give it some support, I would really appreciate that. And the last thing I want to talk about actually is that you guys know that there are a lot of people like me, and there are a lot of people who are in worse situations than me who need an organ. So it only takes a couple of clicks online to sign up to be an organ donor, and Hong Kong really needs to work hard on this because there are so many people suffering, so many little kids, and I've seen it firsthand, and it's just really heartbreaking. No pun intended. Yeah. Thank you so much, guys. It was really an honor.